Hello, Keith Rucker here at VintageMachinery.org. Guys, doing a quick follow-up video on the metal planer restoration project based on the video that we put out this last Friday about the whole belt situation that we ran into, because honestly, I got a lot of comments from you guys, including emails, on YouTube, over social media, with suggestions for how I get around this problem. And really, for the most part, I realized real quickly, based on the suggestions you guys were giving me, that I must have done a really poor job of kind of explaining the problem, and you're not understanding completely the whole situation, because most of the suggestions I got, and this is no disrespect, I appreciate the comments, guys, but you know, they're not going to be the solution to the problem. But because of the number of them, I felt like I really needed to follow up with you guys and kind of go into this a little bit deeper and explain exactly what's going on and why some of your suggestions won't work in this situation. So let's get in here and take a closer look. Before we do anything else, I want to take just a minute or two and just kind of re-explain how a planer works and some things that's going to really kind of tie into the rest of this conversation to make sure everybody's on the same page. So if you're not familiar with a metal planer, if you're familiar with a metal shaper, they work very similar. You have a single point cutting tool down here that makes a straight linear cut across whatever you're working on. Similar to how a milling machine would work, but instead of a tool going around and around, the tool cuts straight, kind of like a lathe cuts, but in a straight flat plane. With a metal shaper, you have a ram that moves in and out. That cutter is on that ram, and that cutter moves across the work. With a metal planer, it's the exact same cutting action, but instead of that cutter moving across the work, the cutter stays stationary for all intent and purposes, and the work is on the table, and the whole table moves up underneath the cutter. So you get the exact same cutting action, but in one, the cutter is moving across the work. In the other, in the case of the planer, the work is moving beneath the cutter, okay? Same type of operation, but the way you get around it is kind of backwards. So what's important to understand with a metal planer, or a metal shaper for that matter, is that the speed in which that cutter is moving varies depending on whether you're in the cut stroke or whether you're in the return stroke. So in the cut stroke, the table or the cutter is moving at a slower speed, the actual cutting speed, but in an effort to save time and to get jobs and work done faster, what they've done is on the return stroke, where you're not cutting, it actually moves faster. So you got two speeds, your cutting and then your retraction. And in this case, the table moves up underneath the cutter, retracts quickly, moves up underneath the cutter, retracts quickly. And I'm exaggerating the speed, but I want you to just kind of understand that. That's going to be really important when you start dealing with the whole pulley situation that we're dealing with here, is because the way that we get those two speeds on this flat belt machine is that we have different ratios of pulleys. We got two different pulleys. One is for the cut stroke, one is for the return stroke. So on this machine, and I have swapped my pulleys around where they need to be correctly. Now this is different from the last video, but my cut stroke is over on this side of the machine. It goes from a small pulley to a large pulley, which slows things down, gives a little bit slower cut. And then on this side, we have the return stroke. We go from a larger pulley to a smaller pulley. And the ratios here, you're going to get a faster. So basically the shaft down the bottom, the bull gear, is going to turn slower when the table is coming in this direction. It's going to turn faster when it's going away. And again, the cut stroke is moving toward the cutter. The retraction is moving away from the cutter. Now, by far, the most common comment or suggestion that I got from you guys is, hey, just reverse the motor, problem solved. And honestly, that was my first thought as well, but it didn't take me very long, because I understand what's going on here, to realize, no, that's not going to work. If we reverse the pulleys, what happens is that you end up getting a fast feed into the cutter and a slow retraction, which is exactly opposite of what we need to do. And I know some of you guys are saying, yeah, but you can move the belts and pulleys and stuff around and you can make it go, you can make it all work out. Well, again, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So let's look at the way this tight loose pulley system works, because that kind of brings in the whole next step as to why that won't work and why we've got to do what we talked about in the first video. So I'm down here at the pulleys at the bottom, and we've actually got two separate pulleys here. This is what's called a tight loose pulley arrangement. It's very common in line shaft driven machines. So if you look, this outside pulley, it just spins. This is called a loose pulley. It just spins freely. When the belt is on this pulley, it's just this pulley is just idling. It's not driving the shaft up underneath here at all. We got an inside pulley over here. This pulley is keyed to the shaft. So when we turn this pulley, look what's happening. This is turning the shaft. That's all engaged into the bull gears, and it's actually moving the table. So in this case, this is on the retraction side, so the pulley needs to turn in this direction, and it moves the table away from the cutter. Now, we've got the little dog that we broke down here. This shifts back and forth, and if you notice, we have the cogs here on the table. So when this comes back and hits this one here, it moves the pulley forward, or moves this cog forward, and that shifts the belts back here in the back, and then it comes up here, it hits this front one, it moves this piece here, which is attached to the belt shifter that moves the belts. Now I've got the belt shifter disconnected right now. I can move it by hand. It's not moving anything up there. But again, the way this works is that when the table is retracting, the shifter is over in this direction. It's engaged on the tight pulley. Whenever we get to where that arm moves and it hits the other side, it's going to move this shifter over. The belt moves over from the tight pulley on this side to the loose pulley. Now this belt is just spinning. The exact same thing is happening on the other side of the machine, but over there what happened is it moved from the loose pulley to the tight pulley, and it's going to engage, because that belt over there does not have a half twist in it. This one does. It's going to reverse it. So now, instead of the shaft moving in this direction, the shaft's going to be moving in the other direction, and it's going to be moving at a slower speed because that's cutting into the part. So once it gets up to the front, it hits that front dog up there, the belt moves over, and now it reverses the table. So this is the whole action. This is how this thing works. So when it gets to the extents of your travel, the belt shifter shifts, it goes from one pulley to the other. So why does it matter that this set of pulleys is on this side and the other set of pulleys is on the other side? It has everything to do with this belt shifter down here. The way this thing works is that these pulleys have to turn in that direction we just showed for everything to work correctly. If I swap the pulleys like I did the first time, and that was on me, I purposely changed them because I knew I had a clearance problem, and I said, no problem, we'll just swap the pulleys. The problem is with this whole belt shifter mechanism down here. Now, in order for if I swap the pulleys for things to work, when I'm driving the pulley, the belt shifter is out here on the idler side when I need to be driving it. So in order to make that work, I would have to swap these pulleys around, put the tight pulley on the outside and put the loose pulley on the inside. Guess what? Can't really do that, at least not without doing a whole lot of work. And let me show you why that is. So I'm not going to pull these pulleys off to show you all this. You're just going to have to trust me on it. But the tight pulley on the inside, it is keyed to the shaft. There's literally a keyway cut in here, and there's a key that goes between these two. So in the shaft, in the actual shaft, we have a milled keyway. If I move the tight pulley to the outside, I got to take the shaft off and cut a new key on this side, and now I've got a keyway cut in the shaft on this side that's idling on, which isn't good. But even more complicated than that, the diameter of the inside of these pulleys are different. The drive pulley has a slightly larger diameter than the loose pulley, and so it's not a problem. I can slide the larger diameter up over the smaller diameter. It fits right up on there, and then the smaller diameter fits in. There's actually a step in there, and that's to keep this pulley separated from the other pulley. It's basically revolving on a step in the diameter of the pulley. So if I swap these around, now my smaller diameter is on the inside. There's no way to get the pulley in there. So the pulleys have to be in this configuration. Yeah, I could bush the pulleys and change the shafting around and make it work, but it's an awful lot of work. It's going to be easier just to swap the pulleys around and do what my plan is and keep the machine set up the way it is, and who knows what other complicated problem that it might introduce if we swap the pulleys around that I'm not even thinking about. So bottom line, there is only one possible way that these pulleys will work, one possible rotation of the motor that everything will work on this, and everything works together. And I know it's hard to wrap your mind around that, and honestly, my mind didn't get wrapped around it until I ran into these problems and I really saw things starting to move, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, I messed up when I swapped those pulleys around. So herein lies the whole problem we had before, is with the bigger pulley on this side, it interferes with this whole gear system here and this pulley over here. And to get around that, what we got to do is move the counter shaft back farther so that this belt, even though there's a half twist in this belt, that's another thing. Someone said, well, just put a half twist in the belt. It'll change the geometry. And you're right, it will. If I go straight down, basically the belt kind of runs right through here. If I do a half twist, the belt cuts across, but it's still hitting this pulley about right in here roughly, so it's still in the way. My solution, we just move the counter shaft back a couple of inches. I'm going to move it back 5 inches, which should give me plenty of clearance for the belt between it and this gear. That's the solution that we need to go to. Now, another comment that I had is, well, why are you having this problem? The machine was designed to run this way. You shouldn't be running into this issue. Well, guys, you got to remember that the way I've got this set up is not the original way things were set up. This whole bracket and counter shaft mounted to the machine is something that I did to solve one of my problems and one of my conditions that I had, and that I wanted a self-contained machine. I wanted a machine that had the pulleys, the counter shaft up here, and the motor all on the whole machine, so that down the road I can move this machine around without having to go moving counter shafts around in the ceiling. Originally, when this machine was set up on a line shaft back in the day, this counter shaft was not on the machine at all. It was literally hanging up in the ceiling above. There was a belt that ran from this drive belt here that I've got going to a motor. It went to a main line shaft that powered this counter shaft, and then the belts came down from the counter shaft to power the machine. And all of this was up in the ceiling. It was not attached to the machine. I built these brackets. I mounted everything on here again because I wanted to have this machine where it was totally self-contained and I can move it around. At the end of the day, guys, more than likely at some point in time, I'm going to want to move this machine in my shop. I'm going to get something else. I'm going to need to rearrange things to make something else fit in here. I know that's going to happen down the road. And instead of having to climb up in the ceiling and take a counter shaft down and motors hanging from the ceiling down and move them, no, all I got to do is just move the machine. Everything is self-contained. It's a lot neater package here. And let's face it, this machine's not going to live here forever. Whether I decide, and I have no plans to, but who knows, I might sell this machine to someone else and it lives in someplace else. And let's face it, one day I'm going to die and my wife's going to have a big auction and all this machinery is going to go somewhere else. I'm just a temporary curator of all this equipment in my shop. That's true for all of us. And that when the day comes that happens, if this thing is all mounted up in the ceiling, the chances of this thing getting put back in use someplace else is greatly reduced, or getting things separated. If the auction company comes in here and sells the planer but doesn't sell the counter shaft, you know, the next person has got to figure out how to make all this work. And I'm solving that. I'm fixing that now. And hopefully this machine will be used for years to come by somebody somewhere, whether it's in a home shop, a machine shop, or a museum. Everything's self-contained. So this is not the original setup. That's the bottom line. And at the end of the day, this is all my screw up because I was not able to vision everything in my mind properly to get it in the right position. It's prototyping. You know, I'm doing something that has never been done before, at least not exactly like I'm doing it. Yeah, mounting a countershaft on machines on a planer has been done many times, but anytime you're prototyping, doing something new, at least in the old school way where you don't have computer modeling to figure it all out on a computer screen, there's trial and error involved. And in this case, my trial and error, I tried something, I had an error, we're gonna make a modification, we're gonna make it work. That is the prototyping process. And let's face it, this whole setup here is it's a prototype right now. Now, once I get it working, it's gonna be fine. And again, my solution, we'll just move it back. I've already got a plate cut for this. We're gonna bolt another plate to this. We're gonna just shift everything back 5 inches. Hopefully everything will work fine that way. And to kind of finish things up here, I want to show you this right here. This is a catalog picture of this machine, and granted there are some slight differences, but this is from the New Haven Manufacturing Company, the same guys that made my machine. This is from their 1899 catalog, and I believe that this particular model of this planer is a slightly newer model than the one that I have. I think my machine is from the late 1880s, early 1890s, somewhere along in there. And there are some subtle differences between these two machines, mainly in the castings down here, the feet, and the way the castings are on the base. It's just a little bit different design, but in all essence, it's identical in many, many other ways. All the mechanisms are the same. The dog gears here and all this is exactly the same. But I wanted you to see, you know, this is looking at this side over here. And it's a smaller pulley, just like I've got it set up now, the way it's set up. We'll have a half twist in the belt. It doesn't show the countershaft, but the countershaft is way up above, mounted up in the ceiling, out of view. But notice it's farther back on the machine. These belts are tilted backwards at an angle. Now, this other belt that's coming up here, this drives this gear work up here. I may not even hook that up on my machine. That's to raise and lower this crosshead. We'll figure that out later. But like I said, I may not even use this belt here. But this is the drive belt. You can see it has a half twist on this side. On the other side, you can see it back there. It has no twist in it, and that's for the feed side of everything. But in the shop, when the countershaft was mounted in the ceiling, it was mounted to the rear of the machine, so those belts were back at an angle and we didn't have any interference issues up here. My countershaft is going to be much closer to the machine, and we just got to get that clearance worked in there. And I did not take that into consideration when I built my brackets on there. Again, simple fix, just didn't foresee it ahead of time. So there you go, guys, just a little bit further in-depth dive into this problem, and again, primarily to help you guys better understand the problem that I'm dealing with. And again, driven by the comments, driven by the suggestions that people were giving. And I'm not being critical of anybody, but I realized because of the sheer number that there was some misunderstandings on how things worked, and I wanted to clarify that and make things a little bit clearer. And hopefully I've addressed those in this video. I thank you guys for sending those comments in. I'm not trying to slap anybody in the face or say, oh, you're dumb or stupid or whatever. I got some of those comments toward me, but I ignore them. It doesn't bother me. But you know, I'm trying to do this in a constructive, positive way, and trying to address, because again, of the sheer number. I appreciate your comments, and guys, I know that I don't respond to everybody's comments on YouTube. It's just a time thing. I do look at them. I do read them. I do, kind of go through them and see what's coming on with these, or the comments you guys are sending in. But because of the sheer number of comments that I get, as well as messages through other systems, whether it be on email or Facebook or Instagram, or even text messages from people that have got my phone number, I spend a considerable amount of time every day just responding to people. And I can either respond to comments all day long, or I can go work in the shop, because I'm using my free time either way to do it. And while I enjoy communicating with all you guys, it's just become a bit of more than I can handle to try to respond to everybody, but I do read them, I do appreciate them, and again, this is in response to me, those comments, so I'm not going to be replying to everybody individually, I'm replying via a video. So with that, guys, as always, thank you for watching. Please do send comments and suggestions. I appreciate them, I really do, and I'm not trying to be negative toward anybody that made a suggestion that's not going to work out. I just wanted you to understand why it's not going to work. And with that, that's going to be a wrap. As always, thanks for watching. Like we always say, subscribe, comment if you like, hit the like button if you like what you see, and hit that bell icon to get notifications of new videos. And guys, with that, we will catch you on the next video, and hopefully coming up soon, we'll get all this stuff worked out. I've got another project I'm going to be working on today. I'm not going to be working on the planer today. This is being filmed on a Saturday, which is really my main work day that I spend in the shop. But hopefully we'll get back to this pretty quickly, get this thing sorted out, get this machine running, and finally make that first chip. Guys, thanks for everything. We'll catch you on the next video.